Hello, welcome to my PowerPoint presentation on the topic of semen and spirituality. I am Hank Kracher. So today there's a great many things going on that people are trying to figure out. And what's interesting is when we study the mysteries, which basically means the past, we find various correlations, which I hope to cover in this PowerPoint presentation. So one of the most important things that I've discovered is when you start studying the mysteries, there are two paths. And honestly, there's a correlation to that in general society. If we look about, we find that there are many correlations to the past and the present. Really, we haven't changed all that much. It's kind of funny how we've evolved, but we really haven't changed. So let's talk about the two paths. There are basically, as mentioned earlier, two paths of the mysteries. There is, of course, the high right-hand path, or white magic. And of course, people are thrown back by the idea of magic. Oh, that's evil. No, not really. Before contemporary religion, we find that there was, and still remains, white and black magic. Of course, those evolved into, let's use a hypothetical, white magic evolved into Christianity, and black magic continues under the guise of various religions and ideas and cults and things like that. So let's study what each of these mean, right? So you have low, left-hand path, or black magic. Now, I want you to kind of think of it, and I alluded to that in the previous slide, good versus bad. In short, white magic represents good. Religiously, one might say it is the teachings of Christianity, right? Its values, what it's trying to instill, as opposed to the religion itself. Now, of course, you could say that about most religions. I often tell people, yes, there's problems with religion, but there's really not too many problems with their teachings, which they, through time has, regardless of what people do, they remain as an idea. Yet black magic has come to represent everything bad, like the teachings of the adversary or Satanism. Now, I've done extensive videos on Lucifer. Lucifer is a different type of situation. For those people who like to lump it together, I do recommend you do a little bit more study, because contemporary ideas about Lucifer are not quite right. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. But the adversary, or adversaries, shall we say, or Satanism, does truly exist. So when you start breaking things down, you start wondering, why are things happening? Why does it happen? And it's really interesting. And that leads us to sperm retention versus Spermo Gnosticism. And people go, what? We're maybe somewhat familiar with sperm retention. Of course, that's immediately dismissed, particularly by men, and they'll claim what doctors say, which is sperm retention, it puts pressure on the prostate and causes cancer, and you become impotent. No, not if you're healthy. Not if you have a good diet, exercise, and so forth. No, you're not going to have that. But if you have a bad diet and you do things that you shouldn't be doing, you'll have an unhealthy prostate. But anyway, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later. But people are puzzled by Spermo Gnosticism. Well, put on your thinking caps, people. We are enlightened, or we're attempting to become more enlightened. So we will cover a very controversial topic here. So basically, sperm retention is the saving of the seed of life for your own health benefits and spirituality, your spiritual quest. Think about that, right? By saving that, and I think I've done that, I've proven that in numerous videos when we start talking about the colostrum oil, or the 33 steps, like Jacob's ladder of the spinal cord, right? So by saving it, we know what the health benefits and the spiritual benefits of retaining semen. Now, that doesn't preclude you, and as we'll discuss later, it doesn't preclude you from having sex. It just says, hey, don't release it. And that goes, of course, contrary to many beliefs today. And we wonder why people aren't spiritual. It's because they're releasing their seed at an excessive rate. Now, on the other hand, Spermo-Gnosticism is ingesting sperm for your own health benefits and spiritual quest. Okay, people go, what? Oh, that's gross. Well, just do a little bit of research. Go to YouTube and put in there, not Spermo-Gnosticism. They're not going to pick up on that because people don't know what that means. They don't read today, unfortunately. But within Gnosticism, there is that belief that you can ingest or use sperm for spiritual purposes. Okay, and I know that comes as a shock to a lot of people who are Gnostic. And I, of course, have Gnostic leanings, but I'm more in line with sperm retention. And so that's something to consider. So think of this as sperm retention is considered white, high, or right-hand path magic, while Spermo-Gnosticism is viewed as black, low, or left-hand path magic. Okay. Now, I do want to relate something, okay, politically. Okay, so I want you to think about this, and we'll talk about this as the video goes on. But I want you to think of, when we think of political parties, we think of the right and the left. And so what does the right attempt to do? It is trying to maintain some resemblance of traditional values, whereas the left is more progressive. They want to change culture and experiment with it, shall we say, because they really are not really even considering the value of historical records because they're not religiously inspired, right? So they say, hey, I am who I am, and I'm going to do whatever I want while on earth, and to hell with everybody else. Well, the right-hand path is more spiritual. And so try to relate that to contemporary events. And as we progress, we'll finish with those points. But think of the right, Republicans as the right-hand path, and the left as the left-hand path, or the Democrats. Now, full disclosure here, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I definitely have libertarian leanings. So, and, I used to tell my students when I was teaching many years ago, I would tell my students, I would say, hey, you know what a Republican is, right? And they would say, what, Mr. K? And I would say, well, it's a Republican on crack. So when you think of libertarian or libertarianism, think of it as more conservative economically, whereas we have liberal leanings, like socially, right? And some of the things that libertarians have been able to get passed would be, of course, legalization of drugs, which the right doesn't like, but the left loves, and three strikes rule, which the right doesn't like. They want to lock people up, and the left says, hey, let's release prisoners. So, no, we adhere to the law, but we kind of believe what you do in the privacy of your own home. See, the privacy of your own home is important. What you do privately is your own business, as long as you don't harm or hurt anyone else. And so, but when you delve into that, you'll find that especially when you're dealing with sperm, you're going to see the right isn't even close, and whereas the left is actually quite close, unfortunately. But the right still seems to think that releasing sperm at any level, they kind of just throw out the baby with the bathwater. Where when I was growing up, there was a general idea that, especially when you're young, and I am pleased that the right is trying to protect children. I think that's appropriate, and not only from a health but a spiritual benefit. We should preserve their spirituality. They're beautiful. When I look at a young child, I absolutely see beauty. And so it's sad that they're trying to sexualize children today, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But that is the left-hand path showing its true colors. Whereas the right, up to a point, will say, hey, we need to preserve children, but at a certain point, we kind of let it go, right? Let's say the right lets it go, say around 13 or 14 or whatever, and they try to discourage certain behavior, but they've kind of just thrown out the baby with the bathwater. And so the right really doesn't talk about the preservation of sexuality as much they say, oh, if you're heterosexual, then, gay. I don't really think they're making a distinction politically anymore. I think there was a time when that case could be made. But you do have the Republican right trying to preserve some resemblance of the past. And of course that confuses the left because they perceive everything as an attack. Not, even the preservation of something is considered evil. So the battle continues, of course. So the root of all white and black doctrines are fought over through sex. Absolutely. You have to think of sex and semen, of course, on the male genitalia, as the battleground. And I think I'll make that case. And so if you're releasing it, you're losing your value, the strength, the vitality that it gives you. And you can see it, especially when they're young. I mean, I can't even imagine sexualizing, 5 and 7 year olds because it goes counter of spirituality. They really don't know what they're doing. But you have young kids, for example, and they'll scream, they'll wake up in the middle of the night and they say, there's a monster in the closet or under my bed. Well, there is some truth to that, if I may suggest, that they probably had a spiritual experience and they weren't conditioned or prepared for it. And it may have been good or bad, right? Just like the serpent and in the story of Adam and Eve. What were they granting Adam and Eve? Well, knowledge of good and evil. So we know that good and evil does exist in this plane and in the spirit world. So the child is unfamiliar with it and is scared. And so they have a spiritual experience. And now the left, obviously, the left-hand path is attempting to take that away from the child. And of course, a lot of people, especially when they become aware of their childhood, let's say young adults, 20, 30, 40, 50 even, they have memories of when they were a child. And so they had those spiritual experiences, but it didn't make sense until they became self-aware later on at some point. Well, now what are they trying to do? They're trying to control the dreams. They're trying to control the spiritual connection, right? So by utilizing this as a force against children, you're shutting that down, and adults too, if I may, right? And we'll talk about that. So in the semen, angels and demons fight to the death. Yeah, this is from esoteric doctrine, especially in particular Gnosticism, but there are others. And so basically we want to think of it as angels or demons are fighting to the death over semen. Yeah. No, that's nonsense. No, I'm going to turn this off right now. Well, I'm sorry that the naysayers don't read a little bit more. You really do need to read and read older documents to understand, and even things that counter your particular belief. So the backbone of the great conflict between angels and demons is sex, because it involves semen. Yeah, so this is a great conflict. It's been going on since the beginning of time. Sexual magic with ejaculation of semen is black magic, while sexual magic without ejaculation of semen is white magic. Absolutely. So we'll go back to the Catholic priest who, in hindsight, maybe I disagree with it because they didn't want this secret to be revealed. Maybe they were aware of it in the beginning, but over time it was lost, the spirituality of semen. And so the priest, what did they try to do? They said, well, you're celibate. Well, okay. So they led a celibate life. I think in particular in the beginning was to be more spiritual. And where it should have been, well, you can have sex, but hold on to it. Unless you're attempting to have a child. And so, there would have been less deviancy by the church, Now, I'm not speaking out against homosexuality. Not at all. No, I am speaking out of the left's quest to sexualize children. What you do as an adult is your own business. But children in particular are very impressionable, and we need to protect that. think that's I think children have a very special place in the spirit world. And I think, to be honest with you, I think they're quite upset, and they're fighting back vigorously. And I think to some effect they're winning. And the reason is mothers and parents are fathers, but they're coming to the defense of their own children. They don't want them sexualized. They want to protect their innocence for a while. Now, as they get older, and like I said, you become self-aware and you decide to have those relationships, that's fine. In fact, this has been going on since the beginning of time. Homosexuality, even transgenderism, has always existed. And I think to stamp it out would be a naive principle. It will exist. It will in a free society. It will continue to exist, and so forth. But I think we can all agree that children have a special place. We need to stay out of that. But again, the left-hand path is really pushing that right now, because it really is about souls, isn't it? You know, how do you affect a person's soul except when they're a child, right? We know the result of traumatizing, either physically or sexually, or whatever. You can traumatize a child quite easily, and so that, I think that's what this is, right? We'll see. Only time will tell how this plays itself out. Can you be spiritual and be homosexual or transgender? I guess you can. But are you preserving the seed? Are you taking medication to alter your hormonal state? You may, in fact, be cutting off your access to the spirit world or the positive world. You'll still have access because one of the favorite things by the spirit world is to influence people through their dreams, their subconscious nature. And so if you're not aware and you're not self-aware and you can't fight evil, then you will succumb to it in the spirit world. So basically, that's what I believe this is all about. So in high right-hand path or white magic, semen is saved, which aids in man's spirituality, as we alluded to. Notice the pharaoh to the right. Notice the serpent, right? Well, of course, some of the meanings, if I may, as I've already suggested, Kundalini, a rising of the Christos oil, right, which will have a profound spiritual effect from the spinal cord, the 33 steps, like Jacob's ladder, going up the spinal cord from the sac, semen, the colostrum oil, which actually originated in the colostrum of the brain. I've done several videos on that. Do a general search and you'll find that there'd be some element of truth to that. But it is an oil, right? And it needs to rise back up. So that's why they have the serpent there, right? It's the serpentine power, Kundalini, Princess Kundalini. In fact, sex is encouraged, but releasing is not. Yeah, many Eastern philosophies, and now Western, it's well founded in many circles in the West. And so we in some small circles, we hold on to that, which we will discuss. This allows the colostrum oil, which is in the semen, up the 33 steps of the spinal cord, in order to anoint the cranium. Okay, so that can come every 28 days, based on the old calendar. The serpentine calendar of 13 months, the serpent month, which I've done in previous videos. And so you rise that up, and of course there's an anointment every 12 months, and so forth. And then that increases your spirituality. But if sex or materialism, right? Because sex is nothing but materialism in this world. You're think about it. What are you doing? Materialism shuts down spirituality. It does. It can't. Anything in excess. It doesn't mean you can't have sex, right? It doesn't mean you can't even, like bloodletting, release once in a while. But if you really want to be spiritual, you hold on to the semen for long periods of time. By it, man's contact with the spirit world is attained and physical longevity accomplished. One of the key lessons of immortality is the preservation in some form or another, the preservation of semen, right? As we discussed earlier. And the right-hand path is the one which I recommend, which is the retention of semen, okay, for periods of time for certain benefits. And of course, the other, of course, of longevity, and we'll discuss that a little bit later, is the left-hand path. There is a spiritual and a physical benefit from ingesting the semen. Now, just do it, like I said, just do a YouTube search, and you'll come up with Hollywood stars using their husband's semen on their face and ingesting it, and so forth, and they talk about the health benefits and the beauty benefits of it. So think about the power of it, right? This process is one of the biggest secrets within the mysteries. We think that this is just, all of a sudden it appeared, and it's part of our evolution as society. It's always existed, people. I'm sorry. It is one of the secrets. It is, particularly in a Christian culture, it is often looked down upon because the ingesting is a left-hand path. Usually the right-hand path doesn't have a problem preserving it, although they still discourage it. That's why I say the right-hand path is probably more down the middle. It's like, well, yeah, we'll preserve it until we're married, then we'll release it as often as we want. Well, again, you're right in the fence, right? You're not ingesting, of course, but you're not preserving it. And the Bible was quite clear when it said, do not release your semen on the ground, which means do not waste it. Think about it. Don't waste it. And when you're just releasing during sex for pleasure, without the purpose of, let's say the woman's on the pill, or you're using a condom, you're wasting it then, aren't you? If you intend on releasing it, okay? So think about that. The two paths, the right-hand path, the left-hand path. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. That which Paracelsus called the semen, or seed of man, is not that which is known as semen to modern physiologists, but a semi-spiritual principle to which the sperm merely serves as a vehicle, an instrument for propagation. So there are several ways to look at this, right? Oh, it's just an instrument for propagation, right? And they look at it in terms of a biological sense and not a spiritual sense, right? So the battle continues. Sperm merely serves as a vehicle, in the same sense as the body of a man is a vehicle for the manifestation of his interior spirit. So you can see the depictions to the right. You'll see it really does look like two spirits with that kind of resemble sperm, don't they? Right? Two maybe battling it out. We don't know, but you can look at different ways of that. You look at the bottom of that same depiction. It looks like the duality of some type of demon. Again, the ancients put that stuff right in front of you, and of course, a more contemporary view of our sperm itself is to the bottom right. Okay, so you can look at the sperm with the two angels or two spirits, so we say, and notice the fountain. Right, what are they doing? Right, it's releasing the water, right, the water of life, that seed, and they're waiting. The spirits are waiting there for it, and of course you've got the demon at the bottom directing that. Right? Well, honestly, it looks like two faces, doesn't it? Right? The duality. And in the spirit world, we're talking about the duality. Other than God itself, everything has a dual sense, or a duality to it. So to put this in more of a perspective, a contemporary perspective, okay, as a former athlete myself, I was aware of this. And of course, I utilized it. I don't think I took it as serious as I should have or could have. I think it's hard for a young man in particular to do that, but if you want to be good, there are certain benefits. So most top-level athletes know that by saving their seed, they enhance their performance. True story. Muhammad Ali was known for months at a time, 2 months minimum before a fight, not to have it. Right? He was at peak performance. He knew that he wasn't, and of course he converted to being a Muslim, and of course that is in their teachings as well, right? Save the seed. And of course I like to use Mike Tyson because he really, during his prime, he really developed his physical physique. And it would be too easy to say, oh, he was on steroids, right? No, to my knowledge, I don't believe he did or did do that. I'm not saying he didn't. But we also know that he promoted NoFap, right? And that is a huge non-sectarian belief today of saving the seed, and telling men in particular not to masturbate 10 times a day. and they've done a lot of research, and they have countless testimonies as to the health benefits from that. So Tyson, very muscular in his prime, 5 years NoFap. Key to success is NoFap, right? Stop masturbating. Stop releasing, okay? And so you look at the two figures at the bottom, you see the one to the right is more muscular and fit. He has confidence, improved blood, less body fat, high sex drive, and the one to the left is fat and flabby and so forth. Yeah, we know that. It's used in athletics all the time. So I was at a reunion recently, and I was teaching the class, and one of the candidates was a sheriff sergeant. Okay, we started talking about NoFap and the health benefits and the spirituality of semen, and it was really, really, really interesting. I said, I don't know what they're teaching today in athletics, but I said, in the dark ages when I was a young man, that was very common knowledge, and he said he was associated with young men in athletics, presumably football, but it could have been other sports, and he clarified that. He said, yeah, they still teach that today. I said, well, that was good. Good to know that it's still being taught at the athletic level. And of course, again, people want to deny that and so forth, but it's going on in small circles around, of course, spiritually, in spiritual circles, or those who are esoteric, who want to achieve that spirituality. There's no doubt in my mind that it's still going on, because we talk about it all the time in certain circles. It isn't mainstream. Let's make that clear. As can be seen in the pictograph, the mysteries, its colleges and teachings have emphasized the importance of semen, sperm, and spirituality. Absolutely. In some form or another, whether it be sperm retention or Spermo Gnosticism. So you can see that the god Osiris taking the phallic oath. This is from the British Museum, right? So, and of course you can see the two pillars, right? Jachin and Boaz. And of course the duality, you see the multiple heads, right? What is that about? I mean, I can come up with different meanings for that, but obviously when you talk about duality, you're talking about spirituality. Of course, and he's holding the phallic, the penis, but he's holding it. Why is he holding it? Think about that, right? Is he saying, hey, hold the retention? I don't know. And, it's funny, I didn't put it actually in the slide, but it is a thought that came to me. Actually, it was last night. It was kind of funny. When you look at words, right, and break semen down, right? See, men. See, men. Men, see. Men, see. Think about that. Semen, men, see. Can you see? Do you have eyes to see? Think about it. Can you see what's going on? Just a thought, right? Do you understand its true purpose? Men, can you see it? And so you have, you can see in the depiction, Amen. So you have the pictograph of the Egyptian god Amen performing fellatio upon himself, clearly illustrates the ancient belief in saving, in this case, consuming the seed of life, or semen, sperm, Spermo Gnosticism. Okay, so again, remember the right-hand path, again, the one I promote, right? I've always promoted that one, right? Which was save it. That's evident. I have no desire to consume it, but I do have a desire to save it. I've been guided spiritually that way. So to save by not releasing is one of the paths, okay? But the other one is obviously consuming it, okay? And you can see, going back to Egypt, this is before Christianity, right? They're talking about fellatio upon themselves. And they basically, this is how he, as the story goes, fertilized the world, okay? Again, not my thing, but it is an important point when we're talking about a spiritual battle. Think of it in spirituality. Remember, we're adults here. I'm not promoting one. Well, I am promoting one, but I'm not promoting the other. But I am trying to illustrate both of them by demonstrating both particular points here and how it relates to spirituality. So consumption of semen is confirmed by Rosicrucian Krumheller, who said that some Gnostic sects also had, as a sacred object, a chalice. Remember the story of the Holy Grail? Yeah. From which they drank the semen of Benjamin. So what was the Holy Grail about? What was holy? The semen. According to the Rosicrucian Gnostics, right? Think about that. Okay? He talked about that. Of course, I think a lot of the Rosicrucian writings that I've read, I would say generally speaking, most of them take the right-hand path because they're devoutly Christian. There's no doubt in my mind, right? So they're taking that path, but they are illustrating the fact that there were some Gnostic sects who actually consumed it. Again, you can't study one without the other. You can't really have a true objective look and not understand the importance of saving, right? Saving the semen, right? Don't waste it on the ground, as the Bible talks. So semen has proven its spiritual power time and time again throughout history. So much so that the ancient Templars, as the legend goes, were anointed on top of their heads with semen as proof of their fidelity. Oh, that's nonsense. I don't believe that. Right? Okay, I get it. You don't read, and you've been preconditioned to think a certain way. I get it. I'm not here to, make fun of your belief. I do wish you would read a little bit more and understand what the ancients were thinking. But again, if we go back and we look about the anointment on the head, still goes on today, right? They anoint on the head with oil. What's that about? Where did the oil come from? Where did the idea of the oil come from? Well, the colostrum oil of the semen. It's in the semen. It's oily. It comes from you. It comes from your colostrum in your brain. It's a very finite oil. And so that anointment of oil, because they use olive oil and things like that today, but back then they used semen, which was oily, okay, and so forth. So it made perfect sense, if you go back, that they would use semen on the head of anointment as proof of what? Preserving the seed. Preserving. So the Templars didn't marry, and so they went without relations for long periods of time. That's why, of course, the priests the same way, right? And so they were holding on to it. So if it was released and they were anointed, it was a proof of their fidelity. That's the way I perceive it. Now, people might perceive it differently. And of course, they were blamed from all kinds of inappropriate behavior by the church and the King of France and so forth in order to get their money and wealth. We know that was, of course, lies, but again, you got to tell lies to destroy your opponents, and that's what they did. So they came up with a lot of stories, and they took things out of context. Sound familiar? Sounds like the left-hand path today, doesn't it? And to be honest with you, the right-hand path as well. It is a spiritual battle. I do want to relate this because we talked about spirituality. I had a discussion a while back, and I mentioned that everything is spiritual, and in reference to we were talking about something politically, and it was really interesting. He goes, "Oh, politics has nothing to do with spirituality." And I you know what? I'm not going to continue to have a discussion with you. I didn't tell him that, but I eventually just backed away and let him continue to believe that nothing in this world is spiritual. And most people believe that. Well, it's a spiritual. Think about that. Right-hand path, left-hand path, and it plays itself out in the spiritual war of sex, or the battle for semen. Now, this is going to get some people who take Holy Communion, they're going to go, what? You know, like the Holy Grail, right? Think about this, right? The cake of light is a Eucharist or Holy Communion and is used within the Tell Me a Secret Society, which was founded by Aleister Crowley in 1904. Now, I get it all the time. You know, people say that Aleister Crowley was a black magician. Okay, I'm not here to defend Aleister Crowley. I do enjoy reading many of his works. I've got countless numbers of his books. And I often reference it in terms of research if I want to know what's going on the other side, right? The left-hand path. I don't think he was a total black magician. I think he actually rode the fence quite a bit. That's here nor there. I'm not here to do that. But what did he do, right? What was he most famous for? To me, anyway. And you're not going to get this unless you read his works and study it. But, you know, how do we know the value of semen according to Crowley? Well, he developed the cakes of light, which what did it contain? Comet flour, honey, a few drops of Iberline oil, olive oil, beeswing ash, and sometimes particular body fluids such as semen and vaginal fluids, right? Absolutely. Or a mix of both, and is usually cooked in the shape of a small flat wafer. Sound familiar? Yeah, there you go. A small wafer. Can't make this stuff up, right? Where did he get that idea? He make it up? No. No, he was studying ancient texts, right, that talked about these things. It appears in their Gnostic Mass and the Mass of the Phoenix. That's a whole nother story. I've done countless videos on the power of the Phoenix, right, and the duality of the Phoenix, right? But it's the Mass, who's the number one messenger of God? The Phoenix. And people say, that's a mythological bird. No, it's not. We've got accounts that there were phoenixes on display in the Roman Colosseum. I think they're extinct now for the most part, but they had high value, much like the eagle, was almost extinct in the United States until we gave it special, shall we say, privileges, right, to protect it. So the phoenix did exist. But it was the messenger of God, right? It was an archangel. And it gave special powers to people by God. It was a direct messenger from God. However, Crowley thought it was important for magicians to perform a Eucharist ritual of some kind daily. He was known for consuming his own semen every day. He also was famously said, just before his death, that he could no longer get an erection. He knew he was ready to die. So why an erection for a man? Why is that so important? Well, when you can stop getting an erection, right, you're ready to die. According to Aleister Crowley, right, you can't physically get an erection. That means your body's starting to break down. Right? Did you waste the seed? Yeah, think about it. Did you waste the seed? And so, again, you're not going to get this unless you read about Aleister Crowley. And, of course, people don't want to do that, so they don't understand both sides of the coin. Okay? Again, I promote white magic, preserving the seed and the rising of the colostrum oil. But there is the other path of preserving the seed by consuming it. And we know a lot of Hollywood elite and people in the elite world do that. Okay, they perform fellatio on each other and women on men and so forth and so on for their own spiritual quest and purpose. Who are you serving, right? They want immediate power and gratification now. So, and I think this is a great story, and it really does allude to or give validity to this argument. Consider the following. Among commoners of the Muslim world, sexual connection with a spirit is considered a great omen, particularly to a boy who had just reached puberty. Wait a minute, we want to give him puberty blockers. We want to castrate them. We want to make little boys into little girls and vice versa. Right? What are you doing? Right? We want to take away the beauty of a woman and make them little boys, make them more masculine. This is a spiritual war. It's a spiritual battle. Most favorable of all was when the first nocturnal emission of semen experienced by a boy was provoked by the Jenny, or the spirit, during the 10 days of the New Year festival within the Shiite sect. I can't make this stuff up. There it is. Right? Some young Islamic men deliberately delayed marriage to prolong relations with their spirit lovers over semen. The spirits were drawn by semen. And, of course, the young boy is enjoying himself so much, he doesn't want to get married. One ascetic holy man claimed to have maintained sexual relationship with the same spirit for more than 40 years. Can you imagine that? And by the way, I've met several great thinkers in the esoteric realm, and they talk about relationships with spirit, with spirit women, or whatever they're doing. Okay, and of course, I've been tempted in the spirit world, and I'm not going to perform in that orgy. I was like, no, that's not me. And so they do test you, but are you empowered during your dreams? I think that's the important thing. And I've heard it all the time. People will say, I have no control over my dreams. Well, you have no control over yourself, because if you can't control your dreams, you can't ask questions, you can't say no, you can't say yes, you're just following whatever. It's a test, right? And they're attempting to influence you. And of course, they had no success with me. I'm sure, more than likely, when I was a young man, they had great success with me. But as I learned to control this power that you have, you will tell the spirit world, no, that's not me. I would rather, a lot of times I want more information. I want knowledges. I've seen great temples. I've, traveled different places and experienced different things. And the best ones never involve sex. Sex, to be the most part, is not part of my astral travel today. I'm sure it was when I was young. There's no doubt about it. But even when confronted with it, I basically, as a general rule, I say no. I would rather not. I'd rather go visit this. I'd rather speak to a member of the Great White Brotherhood or something like that. Okay? So anyway, think that through. Think about how some people still have contact with the spirit world, and they actually, in some circles, they put off relationships with physical women because they want to have that spiritual relationship. They're highly, and it does revolve over sex or semen. Interesting. So you have to think of every sperm as being sacred. Every sperm is sacred. Okay? That's why, we honor the relationship between man and woman. I'm not saying that anything else is wrong. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to bash anyone. But even the ancient world, they allowed, let's take the Roman world or the Greeks even, but the Romans in particular, they had a law. They said you had to procreate. You had to have a son in particular. They needed soldiers for the empire. And so that was a law. And so they understood the sacredness between man and woman. They had no problem with men and or women going to their appropriate bathhouses and doing whatever they were doing, okay, with the slave class. I get that, all right? And I'm not here to get into that, but they still went home and had relations with the wife in order to procreate, because there's a special relationship between man and woman spiritually over semen, and the spirit, it pleases the white class at least. It pleases them greatly when a child is brought into the world. Now, the left-hand path, you could easily see, especially as it's playing out in the Supreme Court, they haven't made a decision, but it's likely that they're going to overthrow Roe versus Wade. Well, the left is all, the left-hand path is going nuts over that. Why? Because they love the ritual sacrifice of killing a baby in the womb of a mother. Think about that. Think about that spiritually. Right? Think about that versus the right-hand path, which is to bring a fresh soul, a beautiful young boy or girl into this world. And the right-hand path treasures that and wants to preserve that. So they're, of course, against abortion. Of course, this law won't do much. There'll be some states that will basically say, no, you can't do it. I think there are like 26 states or something like that. And there are other states who are torn back and forth. And many left-hand path states simply stated they're going to continue to abort. So really, it just cuts down on the number. We're gonna save basically millions of lives, but we're going to continue the death and destruction. So it's the battle still continues, and a lot of people in blue states or right-hand path states will just go to left-hand path states and have an abortion. I think Amazon is, I think they said they'll give $4,000 for people who want to travel to a state to do that. Think about that. The abortions are going to continue, and this ritual sacrifice will continue of killing babies. Okay, so think about it spiritually. Okay, so every sperm is sacred, right? Like a child. In Qigong and other forms of Chinese medicine, Jing is sexual energy, which can also denote essence or spirit. That's why masturbation isn't advised among practitioners. It's a form of energy suicide. They must be masters of their own domain. Can you control it? Can you control not releasing? Oh, a lot of young, I can't. It's just, well, I'm sorry. You're not a master of your own domain. You succumb to the physical pleasures. And I get it. I'm not here to bash you. At some point, at least the seed has been planted. If you're watching this, the seed has been planted. It's possible 5, 10, 20 years from now, it will grow and it will make sense to you. Right? This is a spiritual war. I don't expect to influence a great many people today, but I think this idea, if it's fully explained properly, over time, it will have a profound impact. That's why I'm on Rumble and not YouTube, because I think YouTube, I've proven it time and time again, YouTube was shadow banning me. So it was a useless war to stay on YouTube because no one would have access to the video. So at least on Rumble, there's a resemblance of non-censorship, right? So that's why I'm over here. I'm not even on. I don't post on YouTube anymore because that again is a spiritual war. There is a Chinese proverb that literally equates a single drop of semen to 10 drops of blood. So it's better to bleed than masturbate. So again, spiritual battle. We're only talking about semen, but blood is another element of that spiritual battle. It does draw demons in, and you'll see it play itself out in war. Ukraine, right? That's a spiritual battle. That region has been fighting. The Chinese were talking about they weren't called Ukrainians at the time, but the people from that time, 2,000 and 3,000 years ago. So this is nothing new. This is a spiritual battle. So we see here the Etoro people, Papua New Guinea, believe that young boys must perform oral acts upon their elders and swallow the sperm in order to become sexually and intellectually mature. Yeah. The only reason I bring that up is not to even encourage the idea of fellatio of young boys on men. That's not the purpose of it. Is that these people were more ancient than contemporary or religious West. We've kind of gotten rid of that idea of preserving the seed for whatever benefits there were, but not in New Guinea. I'm sure now that's wiped out, but there was a time, probably in the 20th century, that it was still being performed. Maybe it isn't now. I really don't know, but I mean this is well known that in certain ancient civilization, young boys would perform fellatio upon their teachers in order to basically intellectualize the young boys. Right? Not my thing. I get it, but it goes to the idea of preserving the seed. For what purpose are you going to use it for? Okay? Again, every sperm is sacred. Greek Stoic philosophy conceived of the logos spermaticus, okay, this is the seminal word, as the principle of active reason that made passive matter fruitful. So, in short, in the Greek philosophy, the idea was it activates, right? It activates passive matter, makes it fruitful. This old belief that goes back to, the Greeks. This is what they were thinking at the time. That isn't what they're thinking necessarily now, but that's what their philosophers were talking about. They understood its significance. It gives life. You can get life out of it, right? You can give life, in a woman, and you can also preserve your own. The Jewish philosopher Philo similarly spoke in sexual terms of the logos. So logos is basically Christ, right? Christos oil, as we would call it, as the masculine principle of reason that sowed seeds of virtue in the feminine soil. Yeah, think about that. Right? So when you plant the seed in a woman, it fertilizes the soul. The Christian Clement of Alexandria likened the logos, or Christ, to physical blood and as the substance of the soul. Clement also reflected on an early Christian view that the seed ought not be wasted, nor scattered thoughtlessly, nor sown in a way it cannot grow. So think about that, right? Again, even the ancients, right? Even the early Christians, these generally were influenced by Gnosticism, which had homosexuality, by the way, and transgenderism, men dressing as women. It was very common. I mean, think back even the early church, right? The boys were castrated in order to maintain their boyish voice as they got older. And of course, as the rumor has it, they were also, since they couldn't function, the penis couldn't function, they were also toys for certain members of that class. So, they could still be an instrument of sex. So they would castrate them and to maintain that boyish voice. And they also had, very common, men dressing as women, or transgender, during that time. Nothing is new under the sun. Okay, it wasn't, it was, I want to say it was prevalently popular. We know sexual proclivities in particular were part of the decline of the Roman world, because what it does, it destroys a culture. They can no longer procreate because they're having overt pleasurable acts that will not procreate. And that's why at least the right-hand path is attempting to maintain that. Okay, there will always be an element of society, maybe 10, 20% will always have, maybe even 30%, who knows, will have these overt proclivities. And I don't think you can stop them. But I think in an open and free society, you need to talk about these things. And people will make a decision as an adult, not as a child. Right? We don't make allow children to make those decisions, right? Or teachers in schools and things like that. Okay, so think about it. You have to use it. You have to sow it in such a way that it can grow, right? Is your behavior thoughtless? Think about that. Again, staying on the line of every sperm is sacred, in the ancient Greek religion, semen was considered a form of miasma, disease, bad air, unhealthy, and ritual purification was to be practiced after its discharge. Wait a minute. So you discharged it, and then you had to have a purification process after. So what were they attempting to do? They were attempting you to do what? Retain it, to hold on to it. And then you were considered not clean afterwards. So they had to purify you because it was sort of it was a disease or bad air, unhealthy. Okay, to release it. This is again not anything I'm promoting per se, but I'm trying to emphasize that even the ancients, okay, in the mysteries, right? Because that's what we're doing here. We're studying the mysteries, the ancient beliefs, in this preservation of the seed. In many ancient societies, semen and other body fluids were revered because they were believed to be magical or have magical powers. Yeah, we discussed that earlier, right? There's a spiritual battle over semen and blood, if I may suggest. Okay, we talked about that, but this topic is specifically about semen itself, or sperm, what they're after. But there are, when you're not going to be able to separate the sperm from the semen, although we'd love to, but you really can't do that. Okay, blood is an example of such a fluid, but semen was also widely believed to be of supernatural origin and effect, and was, as a result, considered holy or sacred. Absolutely. Okay? So that's why semen, right? Christ, Christos oil, they all seem to align there, okay? Because it's sacred, it's holy, all right? And that's why you see Aleister Crowley consuming it or using it for ritual, because it's now considered holy or sacred. And we see the church fathers attempting to have man preserve, obviously as examples would be the priest, to preserve that seed, to be an example for others. And of course, they encourage that non-promiscuous behavior up to the point of marriage. But after that, they say, hey, freely release it as often as you want. I do believe that the church at some point did limit the amount of times that a young man and young woman could have sex based on moon cycles and things like that. But that was, especially since it's done in the privacy of a home, there's really no way to monitor that. So that kind of faded away. So the obvious question must be asked: why are teacher unions and teachers themselves, some, not all, schools, Disney, and the LGBT plus community grooming children for early sexuality? Well, it's obvious. It's a spiritual war, right? Yeah, we're thinking about them just, we're doing this, we got how many, I mean, think about how many sexual pedophiles. Of course, they're drawn to children, aren't they, right? So we can see from time to time, you see Disney employees in particular getting arrested. And of course, I'm assuming that Disney does the right thing once they find it out and they fire them, okay? But the point is, and it's not Disney's fault per se, but we know that pedophiles, right? They're drawn to children. So they'll try to get everything from crossing guards to, boys club, Boy Scouts. They pretty much don't exist anymore because of the influence by pedophiles. Now, when I want to talk about homosexuality as being bad, we're talking about pedophilia. So it could be a heterosexual or a homosexual activity. It really doesn't matter. It's just they have an attraction for children, and so forth. So we see that. But why is it does appear to sexualize children, even through knowledge at an early age. It's about grooming them. Okay? I do want to interject something, and I love doing this. I will contact people that I know. After a while, I get to know them a little bit, and I have permission to do this. But I will ask them if they're willing. I ask them a few questions, and oftentimes I'll do it on like Facebook or even Brothers in Lodge or things like that, and we'll talk. And I get to know them over time, and then I ask if that's their birth name, and if it's different, like my birth name is different. I was adopted, and so some questions come up. It's not always an accurate issue, but it does relate to blood type, and their spiritual quest and things like that. But I can tell oftentimes by their name and other issues. I'm not going to say what they are because that's part of the secret. But I do tell them that they're being groomed, groomed by the Great White Brotherhood. And people, wow, I knew that. I don't know why I have these feelings to do these, to study the mysteries. Why do I have this affinity to Egypt or Samaria, you know, or the Celtics and things like that. We don't know, right? But we know that there are spiritual people. And when I tell them they're being groomed for a purpose, and wait for their messages, and start paying attention to your dreams and visions and experiences, and make contact with them, because they're watching you, they're grooming you to see if you're going to respond at some later date. Doesn't mean you will. Doesn't mean the adversary won't get a hold of you. But we know that the spirit world grooms people. Yeah, including children. So why is it far-fetched to say that if you over-sexualize a young child for no purpose than your own, right? There's no reason a 7-year-old should be talking about either masturbation or penetration. It literally makes no sense whatsoever. There's only one purpose for doing that, and that's grooming them for later on in life, that it will at some point be activated. Right? And we know that it happens because we know that that's how the spirit world works, right? Is grooming them. And so when you take away at an early age children's spiritual experiences, because they're supercharged with spirituality when they're young, you take that away, you distract them, you over-sexualize them, they're less apt to go to the white or the right-hand path. They're more susceptible to the spirit influences from the left-hand path. That's obvious. Not always, not 100%, but this is obviously my conjecture, but I have been encouraged to share this with those people who are willing to listen. But why? Why are they grooming them for early sexuality? There's no other reason, right? There's no other reason, if it's just classroom instruction, there's no other reason than to sexualize them for a later activity, right? When they're maybe 12 or 15 or 18 or 25. You don't know, and I'm not saying that one act is worse than the other. All I can tell you is spiritually, the heterosexual is the procreation of life. But if you're a heterosexual and you're having sex and you're releasing, having sex twice a day or 3 times a day, and you're releasing every time, well, I'm sorry, that's a left-hand path. Even though it's a heterosexual activity. Think about that. As opposed, and you could do it in a homosexual activity. You could be homosexual and not be having sex at all. Well, that's the right-hand path. So sex is part of it, but it isn't the only element of that. So, but think about this. Simply stated, by encouraging early sexuality, castration, and puberty blockers, etc., they are shutting down their spiritual development. That's what the attempt is. It's just a spiritual war. Okay, as mentioned earlier, the spirit world uses semen for its own aim. It does. Right? Good and bad. It's a spiritual war, and it's fought oftentimes over semen. Okay, and sex. Now, blood is another issue. That's blood sacrifice, like abortion, war, killing people, ritual. Sadly, ritual still exists over killing to please whatever spirit forces they wish to please. Well, I tell you, the right-hand path, the white magic, the high magic doesn't deal with that stuff at all, and that's why I reference Christian teachings. There can be other, Hebrew teachings, Muslim teachings, and so forth. I've read countless articles and books, right, regarding the postmodern belief that there is no relationship between sex and spirituality. Again, people are going to dismiss it. There is no relationship between sex and spirituality. Well, you're reading postmodern literature. How about you read ancient literature? Think about it. Yet, if this is true, why is there so much esoteric literature regarding this topic? Yeah, think about it. If there's no connection, right, and that's what the contemporary postmodern world will have you believe, there's no relationship between spirituality and semen. They're not, you're just making it up. Oh, that's an ancient belief. That has nothing to do with it. No. Go back to athletes, right? Go back to people, that are spiritually endowed. They will tell you there is. In fact, I've been, since I've been retired now, I've been growing my hair a little bit longer, and people ask me why I'm doing it. I really didn't know. And of course, I do believe in the power of first thought. And for 4 days, look it up, Hank. look it up. And I never looked it up until the fourth day. And I knew it, but I needed to read it myself. And think about I'm part Indian and Cherokee. And so I never really thought about it. I knew it, but I didn't really give it much consideration, was the fact that Indians in particular, I remember I had a student who was Indian, and her little boy had beautiful long black hair. And I remember seeing, he was only like 6 years old. He had really longer than most women. He had always grown his hair. That was a tradition, right? But why did they do it? It's spirituality. Yeah. So I didn't know why I was doing it. I now know why. But I was instructed to do what? Grow hair. So we want and think back in the 1900s, 1800s. Men had long hair. Right? They had long beards, particularly as they aged. Why? It increased their spirituality. Absolutely. They didn't necessarily know it, but it was very common and effective. Well, somewhere around World War I, it stopped, give or take a decade, but it stopped. No, you got to clean shaven, cut your hair. Again, postmodern thinking, right? So think about that. There's so much literature out there. Why do we just rely on postmodern literature? And I've said this within even Freemasonry. We're reading the latest book by so-and-so. I'm like, okay, great. And I used to, read a book, I get it, and I start reading it. And it's a whitewash. They're not really delving into it. Whereas if you go back to the 1900s, or even the early pre-World War II, World War I, you look at the literature, in particular 1900s, 1800s, they were talking totally different stuff. They were talking about living in two worlds, right? The physical world and the spiritual world, right? I'm not saying we've lost our way, but contemporary Freemasons don't do that because they've been trained to think postmodernly. And so there's no substantiation of that. Well, guess what? You can't substantiate spirituality, but you can teach it. Well, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Of course not. You've been taught in a postmodern world. And I had a postmodern education, but I also had an awakening. So you see, the world has lost its spirituality due to a long-standing battle over semen. That's it. They have lost this battle for the most part. And I say this from time to time. In Freemasonry, we have that pyramid, right? And we often say it for those people who are I don't want to say sage class, but those who are attempting to have a higher understanding intellectually and spiritually. We often say it is very narrow at the top of the pyramid. It means very few people either know it, are willing to know it, or study it. There are a lot of great men in the craft, but they're not knowledgeable about this topic or others because they immediately dismiss things based on their postmodern teachings, right? That's what our education system has done, is to dismiss everything until you can prove it. And even when it's proven, I don't believe it. That's not how the spirit world works. So it appears the left-hand path is making one last effort to win this war. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not in the right or the left. I watch this sort of like a theater. It's quite interesting to see it go on. But 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, Democrats the left-hand path would not be talking about these things, would not be promoting everything from CRT to transgender, transformation of children, two children, bypassing their parental rights. That wouldn't have happened even 10, 20 years ago. So what happened to the left-hand path? They're showing their true intent, one last-ditch effort to win this war or convert the young people as much as they can. Because guess what? Sex is fun, right? So is having sugar when you're a kid. So is, you don't mind me saying so, watching pornography for the first time. Like, oh, what's that? What are these feelings I'm having? Well, start that as soon as you can, right? Shut down their senses as soon as you can. So what? So you can control them. That's all that is. It is a spiritual war. Whereas if you allow them to grow to get bigger and stronger, faster. Yeah, think about it. And more spiritual, the longer they can preserve the seed. And that's why in even sports, right, we encourage young men in particular to preserve the seed, because those who preserve it are bigger, stronger, faster, right? And they may even have a more intuitive sense. They have a more of a warrior attitude, shall we say. Okay, so this is going on. We need it to play itself out. In short, I think I will surmise this as a spiritual war over semen, the right-hand path, the left-hand path, and where, high magic, low magic, white magic, black magic. These are beliefs that have always existed, will continue to exist, and will be fought out in the religious, spiritual, and political realms. And we can see it now that you're aware of the left-hand path, right-hand path. Start watching things politically. It's really quite entertaining to watch what they're doing. But like I said, I'm backtracking here a little bit. Although the right is trying to resemble, or they're kind of leaning more to the middle than to the right. They really, at least they got it right with children by preserving the seed. But the left-hand path is just wide open now. It's amazing to see this. And of course, you're getting a backlash. So, and when I used to teach my students, I said, you got about 15% of the population is hard left or hard Democrat. And you got 15% of the population is hard right, hard Republican. But 70% of the population is right in the middle. And that's why you wonder why an election sways every 4, 8, 12 years, right? It really does have to do with the middle population, not the diehard Republicans or the Democrats. You have to win over that 70%, or a percentage of that 70% to win the popular vote, i.e., in our case, electoral votes, right? Because popular vote is irrelevant in a democratic republic like ours. And by the way, we're not a democracy, we're a democratic republic, and there's a big difference. And I love it when the left talks about democracy, because they would love democracy because the majority would win. But in democratic republic, we preserve minority rights, right? And think about that. The minority in the sense of the smaller elements of society that have no voice, like children, right? We can do that. And that's why we're a democratic republic, and I hope we remain that way. But again, these are my libertarian leanings, not right or left. There's some things that Democrats do I am encouraged by, but I got to be honest with you, the Democrats, the left-hand path today, I don't quite I didn't grow up with that belief. That is a new twist in our political / spiritual realm. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this or listening to this video in either case, and I wish you all well. God bless.